Emily Carter had always believed silence was harmless, but lately the silence in her home felt like a growing shadow. The house looked warm from the outside, the kind of place in suburban Connecticut where neighbors waved. Families walked their dogs, and porch lights glowed gently at sunset. Yet inside, Emily felt the coldness of a marriage slowly slipping away from her fingertips. She moved through her evening routine on autopilot, clearing dishes, wiping counters, listening to the distant hum of traffic outside. Everything looked normal, but nothing felt normal. Daniel, her husband, had left early that morning without much more than a brief "see you tonight." He used to kiss her forehead, ask about her plans, double-check if she needed anything. Those days felt distant now, like memories from a different life. She tried not to think about how often he came home late or how vague his explanations had become. Instead, she tried to stay busy. That was her way of holding things together. Just keep going, keep moving. Keep pretending everything was fine. She set the last plate on the drying rack and reached for a towel when a sound broke through the quiet, a soft, hesitant knock at the front door. It was the kind of knock someone makes when they're unsure whether they should be there at all. Emily froze, towel still in her hand. No one visited her this late. Her neighbors usually texted before stopping by. Delivery drivers didn't knock softly, and Daniel would never knock. He had a key. Her heart tapped once, then twice, quicker now. She wiped her hands on her jeans and walked toward the door. A strange feeling stirred in her chest, a mix of curiosity and something she couldn't quite name. She opened the door slowly, the porch light spilling across the wooden floor. Her breath caught. Standing there was Michael Turner, the same Michael who used to live next door when they were kids. The boy who gave her half of his Halloween candy when she cried over breaking her favorite toy. The teenager who teased her gently but always stepped in when someone else took the joke too far. The friend who once knew everything about her without her having to explain a single thing. But the man on her doorstep now looked nothing like the carefree boy she remembered. His shoulders drooped. His dark hair messy as if he had run his hands through it too many times. His eyes, once full of rebellious spark, now held an exhaustion that went far deeper than a long day. He looked shaken, like someone who had just walked away from something heavy and painful. "Michael?" Emily whispered, unsure if she was seeing him or imagining him. He managed a weak, almost apologetic smile. "Hey, Em." Hearing that nickname again pulled something from the past into the present. She hadn't heard anyone call her that in years. Only people who really knew her used it, and most of those people were no longer part of her daily life. Emily stepped aside instinctively, letting the cold night air brush past her. "What are you doing here?" "It's been, I don't even know how long." He hesitated on the doorstep, as if crossing into her home meant crossing into a different kind of truth. "I didn't know where else to go," he said quietly. The words sank into her. Not rushed, not dramatic, just honest. She gestured for him to come inside. "Of course. Come in." He stepped through the doorway slowly, like someone entering fragile territory. Emily shut the door behind them, sealing out the chilly night. For a moment they simply stood there, both unsure of what to say. The soft glow from the living room lamp cast warm light across his face, making the strain in his expression even more noticeable. "I'm sorry for showing up like this," Michael said, rubbing his hands together. "I should have called." "It's okay," Emily replied. You look like something's wrong." He nodded, but he didn't speak right away. Emily motioned toward the couch and they sat down, though not too close. She didn't want to push him to talk, but the tension in his shoulders made her worry. "I don't want to drag you into my problems," he said. "You're not dragging me anywhere," she said gently. "Talk if you want. If not, that's fine too." He looked at her with a pained kind of gratitude. It's the kind you show someone who unknowingly offers exactly what you needed. "Everything fell apart tonight," he finally said. "Completely." Emily felt her stomach tighten. She didn't know what he meant, but it was clear something had happened, something serious. "Is it? Your job, your family?" she asked carefully. Michael shook his head. "Claire." His wife. Emily had met Claire once years ago. Smart, kind, beautiful. It's the type of person who always remembered birthdays and wrote thank you notes. They looked perfect together from the outside. But Emily also knew the truth about life. Perfect from the outside didn't guarantee peaceful on the inside. What happened? She asked. Michael let out a long, shaky breath. She's been seeing someone else. A coworker. It came out tonight. Emily felt her chest pull tight with sympathy. She placed a hand lightly on the edge of the couch, not touching him, just anchoring herself. Michael, I'm so sorry. He stared at the floor, voice barely steady. I didn't want to believe it, but she admitted everything. I left the house because staying there felt wrong. And when I got into my car, I didn't know where to go. I just started driving. And you ended up here, Emily whispered. He nodded slowly. I didn't even plan it. I wasn't thinking. When everything hurt too much, the only person I could think about was you. Emily's heart dipped for a second, not romantically, but in the way old bonds quietly rise when you least expect them. I didn't mean to bring my mess to your doorstep, he said. I'm just lost tonight. Emily shook her head softly. You're not alone, Michael. You came to the right place. For the first time since he arrived, something gentle flickered in his eyes' relief. A small, fragile relief, but real. Emily suddenly realized how quiet her home felt with him sitting there. Not empty quiet, just still, as if waiting for something to unfold, before she could say another word. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table. Daniel's name flashed across the screen. Emily stared at it, feeling a twist in her stomach she had been ignoring for months. Michael noticed her expression shift. Their eyes met, and in that instant, they both understood something without needing to speak. He wasn't the only one carrying a secret tonight. And the night that had begun with a simple soft knock was quietly opening the door to truths neither of them had been ready to face. Michael sat on the edge of Emily's couch like a man who wasn't sure if the ground beneath him was stable. His elbows rested on his knees, fingers tangled together, eyes staring at the carpet as if it held the answer to everything he couldn't understand. Emily watched him for a moment, trying to process the fact that someone who had once been so full of confidence now looked like he was fighting just to stay upright. The house was still, almost too still. Emily felt the kind of tension that makes a room feel heavier, as if the air itself could sense that something heartbreaking had happened long before she heard any details. She walked to the kitchen, poured a mug of hot tea, and placed it gently in front of him. It wasn't much, but it was something warm to hold when the world suddenly felt cold. Michael thanked her quietly and wrapped both hands around the cup. He seemed grateful for something as simple as warmth. Emily sat down beside him, not too close, giving him space, but close enough that he wouldn't feel alone. She didn't push him to talk. She knew that when someone's life cracks open in one night, the first words always come out slow. For a moment, all they heard was the faint hum of the refrigerator and the distant whisper of cars passing outside. Finally, Michael exhaled a long breath that sounded like he'd been holding it for hours. I found messages, he said. His voice was calm, but the hurt beneath it was clear. Not just one. There were dozens. Emily's chest tightened. She knew what he meant without needing details. She didn't need the names, the dates, or the exact words. The pain in his voice told her enough. I'm so sorry, she said, meaning it deeply. Michael shook his head slightly. I knew something was wrong for weeks. I could feel her pulling away. She started coming home late, making excuses. But I kept telling myself she was just stressed. I wanted to believe that. Emily listened closely, feeling compassion grow for him. Infidelity, real or suspected, was a wound that didn't bleed on the outside. But on the inside, it could drain a person completely. When I confronted her, he continued, she didn't even try to deny it. She just admitted everything. Said she didn't want to lie anymore. His voice cracked at the last part, a sound that carried months of confusion and exhaustion. Emily placed her hands in her lap, fingers squeezing tightly. She wished she could offer comfort without crossing boundaries, without making assumptions. But she knew that heartbreak didn't always need solutions. Sometimes it just needed space and honesty. "What hurt the most?" Emily asked softly. Michael's eyes lifted toward her for the first time since he started speaking. "The way she looked at me," he said, "like I was a stranger. Like we weren't married for 6 years. Like nothing we built mattered." A sharp ache spread in Emily's chest. She knew that look. Not because Daniel had given it to her, because she feared she might someday earn it without trying. The distance in her own marriage had been slowly stretching, so quietly that even she didn't know when it began. "You didn't deserve that." "Michael," she whispered. He swallowed hard. "I don't even know what I deserve anymore. I just know I couldn't stay there tonight. Every corner of that house felt wrong." Emily nodded. She understood more than she wanted to admit. He took a deep breath. "I didn't plan to come here. I just drove. I passed the old grocery store, the baseball field, and then I turned onto Maple Street without even thinking. And when I saw your house, I just stopped." Emily looked at him carefully. "Why my house?" He hesitated, not out of fear, but because the truth felt loaded with emotion. "Because you were the last person who ever made me feel like someone understood me without judging me. I didn't want advice or solutions. I just needed a place where I didn't have to pretend." Emily felt her throat tighten. She didn't want him to think she was some perfect person from his past. She wasn't. She was struggling too, just in quieter ways. "You can always be honest here," she said. "With me, you don't have to hide anything." Michael's shoulders eased slightly. He put the cup down and rubbed his palms against his jeans. It's like he was trying to steady himself. "I should have reached out earlier," he said, "before things got this bad. But I kept telling myself I could fix it alone." Emily nodded slowly. "We all do that, don't we? We think if we hold on tight enough, things will go back to how they were. But sometimes they don't." Her voice cracked a little at the end. Michael noticed. He looked at her closely, now really looked. "Emily, are you okay?" She blinked. "Why?" "You just look tired," he said gently, "and not the kind of tired a good night's sleep can fix." The words hit her harder than she expected. It wasn't the statement it was the fact that someone finally noticed. Daniel hadn't looked closely at her in months. He never asked why she seemed distant or distracted. He was too busy, too stressed, too preoccupied with things he never explained. Emily tried to smile, but it came out faint. "I've had a lot on my mind." Michael didn't push. He just nodded in a way that told her he understood more than she said. When you've known someone since childhood, some things don't need explanations. Emily's phone buzzed again, another message from Daniel. She didn't check it. She didn't want to break whatever fragile calm existed between her and Michael in this moment. "Does he know I'm here?" Michael asked quietly. "No," she replied. "He usually comes home late. He won't expect anything." Michael held her gaze for a moment. "You deserve someone who notices when you're hurting." Emily's breath caught. Not because he was crossing a line, he wasn't, but because no one had said something like that to her in so long before she could respond. Michael leaned back against the couch, sighing deeply. "Tonight showed me how quickly life can change. One minute you think you're safe, the next everything breaks." Emily nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know the feeling." Silence settled between them, not uncomfortable, but loaded with understanding. Two people sitting in a quiet room, both realizing their lives were changing in ways they didn't expect. For the first time in months, Emily didn't feel alone in her confusion. And for the first time that night, Michael didn't feel like a man standing in ruins. They weren't seeking romance or answers or promises. They were simply sharing a moment of truth. In a world where truth was hard to find, but the night wasn't finished with them yet, because the next knock, much louder than Michael's, came from the front door. And the look on Emily's face told Michael immediately. Whoever was on the other side was about to drag a new truth into the room, one neither of them were ready for. The knock at the door faded, but the tension it created stayed in the room like a shadow. Emily's heart jumped, and she glanced at Michael quickly, knowing this moment would change something between them. She didn't move right away. Her phone buzzed again on the table. Another message from Daniel, but she didn't reach for it. She couldn't deal with two doors, one ringing, one vibrating, both demanding the truth she had avoided for too long. She stood up slowly and walked toward the hallway, trying to calm her breathing. Her hands shook slightly, a sign she tried to hide. Michael rose from the couch too, not wanting to intrude but unable to sit still when he sensed her fear. "Emily," he said quietly. "Do you want me to stay or stay?" she said before he could finish. The word came out soft but firm. She didn't want to face whatever was coming alone. She walked to the door and opened it, expecting maybe a neighbor, maybe a package, maybe anything ordinary. But life rarely offered ordinary warnings. Standing on the porch was Daniel, her husband. He looked surprised to see the lights on, as if he hadn't expected her to be awake. Or maybe he hadn't expected her to be alert enough to ask questions. He stood with his phone still in his hand, car keys dangling from the other. His hair was messy. Not like he had been at work, but like someone who rushed out of a place he shouldn't have been. "Emily," he said slowly, "you didn't answer my calls." There was no warmth in his tone, only a tightness, like he was rehearsing calmness instead of feeling it. Before she could respond, he stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. It was something he had always done, but tonight the gesture felt strange, almost unwelcome. Daniel stopped abruptly when he saw Michael standing near the living room doorway. A flicker of confusion crossed his face. What is he doing here? Emily's mind scrambled for an explanation. But Michael stepped forward. "I came to talk to Emily," he said calmly. Daniel's jaw tensed. At this hour? Emily could see what Daniel was thinking, even though nothing inappropriate had happened. She felt her pulse quicken, not from guilt, but from a truth she had ignored for too long, the truth that her marriage had stopped feeling like a home long before she opened the door for Michael. She lifted her chin slightly. "He needed help, Daniel." Something happened. Daniel exhaled sharply, the frustration clear in his face. "This isn't the time for visitors. We need to talk." Emily froze. His tone wasn't angry, it was guarded. Too guarded. She knew that tone well. It was the tone of someone trying to control the story before it fell apart. Michael noticed it too. He didn't move closer, but he stayed firm, as if silently telling Emily he wasn't going to let her face this alone. "Emily," Daniel said again, softer now. "Can we talk privately?" That was when Michael spoke up, his voice steady. "Daniel, maybe you should explain why you're here so late." Daniel shot him a sharp look. "This is between my wife and me, is it?" Michael asked, not accusing, simply questioning. And that single question seemed to shake Daniel more than anything else. Emily's chest tightened. Something felt wrong. Terribly wrong. Daniel's eyes darted away for a moment, just a second, but it was enough. She knew that look. She had seen flashes of it for months. The late nights. The strange excuses. The phone flipped face down. The rushing in the morning. The distant voice that never matched the busy explanation. She felt her breath hitch. "Daniel," she whispered, "where were you tonight?" His expression stiffened. "At work. You know that?" Michael watched him carefully, not angry, just observant. A man who had just walked through betrayal could recognize the signs in someone. Elsa's voice instantly. Emily swallowed hard. "You weren't answering my messages. You didn't even tell me you were staying late." Daniel stepped closer to her, lowering his voice like he wanted to keep the conversation sealed between them even, though the truth was already cracking open. "I don't need to explain every shift to you," he said. "I'm tired. I just want to rest." But rest wasn't what Daniel looked like he needed. He looked nervous, uneasy. A man aware that a door behind him had been left open. Emily forced herself to speak. "Daniel, please just be honest. Something is wrong. There's been distance for months. You come home late, you barely talk to me." "That's not true," he snapped quietly, more defensive now. You're overthinking. Michael's jaw tightened for the first time. Gaslighting won't fix this. Daniel's head whipped toward him. Stay out of this. I would, Michael replied calmly, if Emily wasn't the one hurting. Emily felt her throat tighten. She wasn't used to someone stepping in for her. Daniel had always brushed off her worries. Michael wasn't doing that. He was simply standing with her, not speaking over her, just supporting her presence. She took a breath, steadying herself. Daniel, where were you tonight? Finally, Daniel's shoulders sagged. For the first time, he didn't fight her question. He didn't try to change the subject. He didn't go on the defensive. He simply looked tired, emotionally tired. I don't want to talk about this in front of him, he murmured. Emily felt her heart sink. That wasn't an answer. It was a confession without words. Michael watched quietly, but Emily sensed his own hurt stirring beneath the surface. They were two people living different stories, yet somehow walking through parallel heartbreaks. Emily, Daniel said softly, please, let's talk tomorrow. Tomorrow, it was a word she had grown to hate. Tomorrow meant postponing. Tomorrow meant pretending tonight didn't matter. Tomorrow always protected the lie and suffocated the truth. No, she said, surprising even herself. Not tomorrow. Daniel blinked. Emily, tonight, she said, voice firm but calm. I'm done avoiding things. The silence that followed was thick, heavy, and painfully honest. Daniel exhaled slowly. He didn't admit anything, yet everything felt admitted. The space between them was full of the truth they both already knew. Emily looked away, not wanting to cry. She wasn't angry, just tired of feeling alone in a marriage where she once felt safe. And Michael, watching her, understood that loneliness in a way no one else could. He stepped back slightly, giving her room, but staying close enough to steady her if she needed it. That was when everything changed again, not because of a confession, but because of a single voice outside the doorway. A woman's voice, soft, familiar, and completely out of place. Daniel, did you forget your jacket? Emily's heart dropped. Michael's face went pale. And the truth they both feared finally stepped into the open knot slowly. Not gently, but with the quiet force of a life collapsing in one single breath. The door had barely closed when the atmosphere in the living room shifted completely. Emily stood frozen in the middle of the room, her heart pounding so loudly it felt as if it would burst through her chest. Daniel's expression was unreadable at first, then flickered between anger, fear, and shock. Michael, standing near the couch, had a tension in his shoulders that told Emily he was bracing for a confrontation he didn't want but couldn't avoid. And then she heard a voice she never expected to hear inside her home. Claire, Michael's wife. The moment felt suspended. Like time itself had stopped. Emily's mind raced, but she forced herself to breathe. She had seen heartbreak in Michael's eyes. And now she realized that tonight would test every ounce of composure she had left. Claire. Michael's voice was quiet, almost controlled, but every word carried the weight of months of pain and disbelief. How long? Claire looked at him, hesitation and guilt warring on her face. She didn't answer at first. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Until Daniel cleared his throat nervously, looking between Emily and Claire like he was trying to decide which side to defend. His usual confidence seemed gone, replaced with a nervous energy that made Emily realize just how fragile their family facade had become. Emily's chest tightened. She hadn't imagined the past months being this real, this sharp. She had suspected, yes, small signs, missed explanations, distant looks, but nothing had prepared her for the confrontation happening in her living room. And it wasn't just Daniel and Claire. Michael's presence had made it impossible to lie or hide. It's possible to delay the truth any longer. Finally, Claire whispered, her voice trembling, Michael, I'm sorry. Michael's gaze met hers, steady now, calm but filled with a kind of quiet fury that didn't need words. Emily noticed it's the way he carried himself, the way he didn't lash out, the way he held his pain like a shield. He was broken, yes, but he was not reckless. And Emily realized that this calm strength was what had always drawn people to him, even in childhood. Now, it was holding her in place as well. Daniel tried to intervene, stepping closer to Emily as if he could reclaim the situation by proximity. "Emily, it's not what it looks like," he said quickly, his words clipped and rehearsed. His tone carried desperation, the kind of tone someone uses when they know the walls they built are crumbling. Emily looked at him, her eyes steady and unwavering. "Then tell me, Daniel. Tell me the truth." There was no accusation in her voice, only clarity. She had spent months walking through a fog of distance and uncertainty. Now she demanded honesty, not explanations she could dismiss, not excuses she could argue against. She wanted the bare, unfiltered truth. Daniel's lips parted, but words failed him. For the first time in their marriage, Emily saw a hesitation she had never noticed before. Claire's presence made the truth unavoidable. Every secret, every lie, every omission pressed down on him now. The moment he tried to speak, Emily realized that years of avoidance and pretending had led to this, a living room full of exposed truths, where no one could hide anymore. Michael's gaze didn't leave Claire. "You lied? You hid it. You led me to believe—" "Everything was fine," he said quietly, pain simmering beneath the surface. Emily could feel the weight of those words like a physical force. She understood them. She had lived with a similar sense of betrayal, even if the details were different. She felt a strange, bittersweet solidarity with him. Not romance, not yet, but a bond formed in shared truth. In honesty that was forced by circumstances too strong to ignore. Claire's hands trembled slightly. "I didn't know how to stop it," she admitted softly. "I wanted to, but I didn't." Her voice was weak, but the words cut through the room with an undeniable clarity. For Emily, it was surreal. The person she had once believed could never betray now stood exposed. Admitting the fracture that had quietly grown over months. Daniel finally spoke again, his voice small, uneasy. "Emily, but she cut him off. No, I don't want half-truths anymore. I want honesty. That's all I've ever wanted." Her tone carried a weight, a resolve that made the air in the room feel sharper. No shouting, no anger, just a calm, undeniable demand for truth. Michael nodded subtly at her, as if acknowledging the quiet power in her words. Emily felt the presence of two worlds colliding. It's the old life she had tried to preserve and the reality that was finally breaking through. Michael wasn't just a witness. He was a mirror to the pain she had been avoiding in her own life. For a moment, all four of them froze. The room was heavy with the unspoken, the missed moments, the lies that had built invisible walls between them. Emily's gaze drifted briefly to Michael. He didn't move closer, didn't try to shield her or claim any intimacy. Instead, he stood there steady, letting her process, letting the truth breathe. She realized that this presence, this quiet support, was more powerful than any words could be. He wasn't solving her problems. He wasn't offering romance or comfort in the traditional sense. He was giving her acknowledgement. He was letting her feel what she had been feeling for months and validating it without judgment. Claire's shoulders slumped. Resignation in every movement. Daniel's face betrayed confusion, frustration, and an awareness that nothing he could say would fix this instantly. Emily, on the other hand, felt a clarity she hadn't had in years. She could finally see things without the fog of denial. She could finally feel what she had been suppressing: the loneliness, the unmet needs. The sense that she had been living in a quiet void while pretending everything was fine. "Michael," she said softly, almost to herself, "thank you for being here. Not for fixing anything. Not for judgment, not for interference, but for simply being a witness to the truth." Michael's steady gaze met hers, and he gave the smallest of nods, acknowledging the unspoken gratitude and understanding between them. The adults in the room started to disperse naturally. Claire and Daniel, the two whose actions had brought this turmoil, left first awkwardly, quietly, carrying their explanations with them, words that Emily didn't need to hear anymore. Their departure left a vacuum in the room, a silence that felt heavy at first, but gradually became lighter. Emily and Michael were left in that quiet space, the calm after the storm. Emily exhaled deeply, leaning against the wall. Her body trembled slightly, not from fear, not from anger, but from the release of months of tension finally leaving her chest. Michael stepped closer, careful, respectful, a silent pillar of support. "You didn't deserve that," he said softly. Not a question, not an accusation, just a truth she needed to hear. Emily shook her head faintly. "Neither did you," she replied. Her voice was calm now, not angry, not confused, just honest. For the first time in a long time, Emily looked at Michael and saw him not as a figure from her past, but as someone standing beside her in the present. He wasn't her husband. He wasn't a replacement. He was a witness, a confidant, someone who had seen the night's truths unfold and hadn't turned away. They didn't speak for a while. There was no romantic rush, no sudden confessions, no immediate solutions. Just a quiet understanding that life had changed and that the truth, once forced into the light, could no longer be ignored. And as the night settled, Emily realized something profound. The knock on her door, the decision to let someone in when she didn't know why he was there, had changed everything. Not because romance began, not because heartbreak ended, but because honesty, clarity, and human connection had arrived in a way she had never expected. She felt stronger, calmer, and, for the first time, ready to face the future without pretending that everything was fine. The night had forced the truth into the light. And in that light, Emily and Michael discovered that some beginnings aren't about love. At first glance, they're about shared understanding, respect, and the courage to face reality together. It was a beginning, quiet but undeniable, and it belonged entirely to them.